With that said, let's get to the big game on. Well, there were two big games, obviously, on Tuesday night in the Champions Classic. And what I'm going to do over the course of the college basketball season is when there is a big game, when there is a marquee game, at some points, I am going to jump on YouTube, kind of do some quick, immediate reaction to some of the bigger games. Did it on Friday night live from the aircraft carrier in with Michigan and Michigan State and Gonzaga. I am doing it again here on Tuesday night, Kentucky, Michigan State. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, I appreciate your support. Also, we are going to run this on the Wednesday Aaron Torres pod. But with that said, I do want to get to the game itself. And final score, it was an interesting one. I don't know if it was good. I don't know if it was bad. The refs got in the way at times. There were a lot of turnovers. Frankly, it looked like November basketball. But credit to Michigan State, a few nights in a game that I was at, after losing by 1.2 Gonzaga on that aircraft carrier, they bounced back with the 86-77 win in not one, but two overtimes over Kentucky. And so I want to get into it. I want to break it down. And I want to start where I do, frankly, with a lot of the college football games and results and some of the bigger scores that we get in college football. Now, college basketball, it's not as life and death when we talk about an individual game or result. But here's the bottom line. I say it with college football all the time, and I'm going to say it again. Oftentimes, the more interesting story is in the losing locker room. And while I'd love to just pat Michigan State on the head and give them credit for a great win, and it was, in fact, a great win, I do think we have to start with Kentucky as, about 8-9 months after losing to St. Peter's in Indianapolis in the same building in a game that they were in control in late. They end up losing to Michigan State in much the same fashion. In control in regulation, have a chance to pull it out. In control in overtime, have a chance to pull it out. Do not execute either time. Do not finish either time. And now they fall to 2-1 on the season overall. And when you talk about this game, again, listen, in the bigger picture, it's not that big of a deal. This isn't college football. If you lose one game, the season isn't over. But at the same time, I think where Kentucky fans are frustrated and where they should be on a night like tonight is with the execution late in the game. And frankly, I saw my buddy Matt Jones, Kentucky Sports Radio, tweet about this. A lot of the same problems that we have seen from Kentucky over the last couple years came to fruition late in the game. They need buckets. The game isn't as loose. The other team is clamping down on defense. Kentucky doesn't really have an offense. And listen, you guys and girls know me. I'm not X's and O's guy. I don't claim to have all the answers and tell you exactly what you should be doing. But you can see when a well-coached team is getting easy baskets like Michigan State late, frankly, and you can see when a team is struggling in the half court. That was exactly what happened with Kentucky. That was exactly what happened late. Oh, by the way, the three-point shooting, which had been so good early in the year, once again failed them in a big game as they finished just 7 of 25 from three. That's 28%. And so it's incredibly frustrating. I also think on top of everything else, another thing that happened a lot late last year came to fruition on Tuesday night in Indianapolis. Oscar Tshiebwe was unbelievable. And when Oscar Tshiebwe fouled out, all of a sudden the offense went stagnant. And this was the problem last year. Remember, last year, late in the year, at probably about middle to late February, we thought Kentucky might be the number one team in the country. Then again, it was much the same. Now, granted, they had some injuries last year, some problems maybe behind the scenes that we didn't realize. Kellen Grady's hurt. Severe Wheeler's never 100%. I get all that. But at the same time, late last year, the issue was creating offense. The issue was easy baskets. The issue was relying too much on Oscar Tshiebwe. And I do think that we saw a lot of that on Tuesday night. And so to be blunt, I completely understand where a Kentucky fan is walking out of the building in Indianapolis again, scratching their head, wondering what went wrong. How did this happen again? Now, with that said, I do want to say a few things about Kentucky before we get to Michigan State. One is for all the negativity, all the frustration. This is why, listen, people say, oh, Torres, you like to talk Kentucky. I like to talk Kentucky because they have I won't say they are the definitive, but among the most passionate fan bases in all of college basketball, and they care at a level that few fan bases in college basketball do. And so why do I bring it up? It's because I understand the frustration, but if you take a 30,000-foot view, just think about it like this. Twice in this game, late in the game, at the end of regulation and at the end of overtime, Kentucky was fouled up 1 with a chance to extend the lead to 3 in both situations. In both situations, unfortunately, it was the same player. I'm not criticizing. It's just a fact. Cason Wallace misses the front end of a 1-and-1. He makes the back end, which allows Michigan State to tie the game, to send it to overtime and double overtime, okay? But at the same time, at the end of the day, the bottom line is this. If he makes both of his free throws in either situation, it completely changes the trajectory of this game, because now all of a sudden Michigan State can't run a great out of bounds play to get a wide open look under the basket. They got to run, they got to get down the court, they got to make a 3, and it's a completely different game. So for all the frustration, I also would say this. In a game coming in where you have a bunch of new players coming back off of injury, lineups that you haven't played, you were basically a free throw in regulation or a free throw in overtime of being in a great position to win. And so that's where I kind of want to end my thoughts on Kentucky. I do think there's some positives to come out of this, right? Part of it is, I think what we saw what John Calipari talked about on Monday after DJ Wagner, the #1 high school player in America, committed to Kentucky. If you remember, DJ Wagner commits. John Calipari does a little video with all the players of his #1, all the names of his #1 ranked recruiting class on a t-shirt. And what he says is, guys, look, we're all excited, but you need to be patient with this team. Why did he put out that video? Why did he send that message? It's because I think he knew what was coming on Tuesday night. That's not an excuse for the late game execution, but you have to remember, at the end of the day, most of these guys have not played together for most of the fall. Jacob Toppin missed time with injuries. Oscar Tshiebwe, this was the first game action that he had all year. Sahvir Wheeler missed time with injuries. Players have been in and out of the lineup. And so this is a process. It's going to take time. And I think if this team stays healthy, if this roster stays healthy, and if this game takes place, December 11th instead of November 15th, it's a completely different deal. In terms of other positives for Kentucky, I mean, the biggest positive is you got back the National Player of the Year. And I will tell you this, I am blown away by how good, like we sometimes, there are certain people in sports that we take for granted. And I think Oscar Tshiebwe is officially one. Guy hasn't played competitive basketball in weeks. Guy comes off the bench, doesn't even start. Guy unfortunately fouls out and still finishes with 22 points, 18 rebounds, and 4 blocks. So at the end of the day, Kentucky fans, no matter how bad it gets, you have yourselves Oscar Tshiebwe, and you are going to be okay. I also thought, for the most part, that backcourt of Sahvir Wheeler and Cason Wallace looks really good. Sahvir Wheeler, I don't know if he can stay healthy, but if he can, this is a guy that is as good of a college point guard as, I don't want to say anybody in college basketball, but finishes the game on Tuesday night with 16 points, 8 assists, 2 steals. And he is so good at getting into the lane, finding his shot, finding offense around the rim. The key for him is going to be to stay healthy. And if you can pair him with Cason Wallace, who on Tuesday night was phenomenal with 8 steals, I believe it tied a Kentucky record, you're going to be okay. Think about just what I told you. You have a force down low. You have a starting point guard who led the SEC in assists. You have a lockdown wing defender. That is a great place to start, even with the frustrating loss on Tuesday night. Now, you got to get the three-point shooting a little bit better. You got to work on the late game execution. Again, I understand the frustration. It's one game. You have time to bounce back. And obviously, you're going to find out really quickly if you do bounce back, because you play Gonzaga on Sunday. From the Michigan State perspective, listen, I don't know that I learned a ton about them, only because I got a chance to see him in person the other night in San Diego against Gonzaga. And what stands out to me about this Michigan State team, I think with this Michigan State team, we think big, physical, tough, mean, Big Ten, football on a basketball court. And it's like, that's not really who this Michigan State team is. They're led by their guards. Joey Hauser is kind of a stretch guy at the 4. And this is going to be a really good team, kind of playing a new era of college basketball, looking very unlike Michigan State that we know. That Michigan State that we know, that's physical and out rebounds and out toughs you, outside of the kid Mady Sissoko below, they really don't have those guys. But here's the good news. We saw how good the rest of their guys could be. Tyson Walker was unbelievable down the stretch. Hit a couple really big baskets. He's their starting guard. Joey Hauser, 23 points, 4 3-pointers, 20 points, from Malik Hall, including those 2 big buckets to send it to overtime and to double overtime. And so if you're Michigan State, I just think you come out of this feeling really good. You're 1 shot away from beating Gonzaga, and you do take care of Kentucky in double overtime. Now, for Michigan State, it doesn't get any easier. Friday, you host Villanova. Then you go to the PK 80 tournament. But at the same time, you're 1 shot away against Gonzaga from being 3-0 right now with wins over Kentucky and Gonzaga, who both started the season ranked in the top 5, excuse me. So look, from a Kentucky fan perspective, I get the frustration. I would also say, listen, it's 1 game. You got time to figure things out. And I'll say this too. I don't think there's going to be many days where Antonio Reeves and CJ Frederick shoot a combined 2 for 12 from 3. So look, not the performance you wanted, especially after the way things ended last year, especially in the exact same building. But does not mean he can't get better. And look, here's the great part. This is not the typical John Calipari schedule where you play the Champions Classic and then you don't play anybody forever. Get home, get rested, get ice, get Oscar Tshiebwe healthy, and get ready for Gonzaga because you're flying out to Spokane later this week. And for Michigan State, heck of a win, heck of a